Why did you get fired? I was 16 and working at an Ace Hardware as an after-school weekend job. One of my responsibilities was taking out the trash at the end of the night. One evening, I was closing with another guy who was a longtime employee. He said he would get the trash and that I could go home. Come in the next day to boss waiting for me. Says, "Woman word, how come trash wasn't taken out last night?" I respond that other employees said he'd do it and told me go home. Boss says that's not what other employee is saying. Says I was supposed to do it and just left. I disagree, get fired. Over 20 years later, still salty. Didn't even like that job, but duck you, John. John is the coworker. For clarity, story 2. I asked too many questions, but also did too much on my own without asking for clarification. Then I pointed out that those two things in my review conflicted and they really didn't care for that. Story 3, came in to do some mechanic work on my day off. I fixed small engines on go-karts, taught by my friend's dad. My main job was running the go-karts, but on my off days I'd come in for OT and to keep up on the maintenance of the cars. The manager that day saw me working on go-karts and told me to take over for whomever was running the carts that day. I told her I was there to fix some carts and do some regular maintenance as it was my off day. She told me she didn't have the people to watch carts today and she needed me to do it. I had to explain that wasn't my problem as I was there on my off day. She escalated and told me to go run the carts or I could leave and not come back. I finished the cart I was working on and left. The general manager called me the next day and invited me in for a meeting where I got my job back, got an apology from the manager who fired me, and I got to watch the manager who fired me get fired after apologizing to me. It was wonderful. I worked there 2 more years in the highlight of my teen years. Story 4. I openly mocked my supervisor's spelling errors and didn't show up to a shift they scheduled me for after I specifically told them I couldn't work that time. Story 5. District manager emailed the whole store giving us a large list of tasks to complete before Black Friday. Jokingly, I simply typed no and showed my coworker just to get a cheap laugh. I was obviously not going to send that. Before I could react, my coworker reached over and hit send. My heart dropped, and I got a phone call later that evening saying I wasn't a team player. I was refusing a direct order from a superior. I tried to explain it was a joke and that I accidentally hit send. Then I got berated for not taking the job seriously. Looking back, it was a blessing in disguise. It was the last Thanksgiving with my brother before he passed. Story 6. Quality standards kept changing unpredictably while time limits kept crunching tighter and tighter. Eventually, my quality slips one too many times and boom, that's all, folks. The entire program shut down about a year after I fell off. The company had lost their contract. I sure didn't have to wonder why. Story 7. Not me, but my favorite nursing assistant was fired because she couldn't figure out how to apply for FMLA so that she could get off work and receive chemo. She was just old and computer stuff really confused her, but she was a phenomenal aide. They let her work her full shift, then fired her. She had just applied to nursing school using our program to pay for it. I quit a month later. The fact that they didn't have someone from HR sit down with her and show her how, before it got to that point, disgusted me. Story 8. Manager fired me because she was tired of being informed every time I got called cracker or honky. The opening arguments for my suit will be laid out in August. Wish me luck. Story 9. I'd never been fired before this. For context, I've worked part and full-time in retail since 2016. I've also done unpaid internships related to my field, archives. And then I get a paid part-time internship at a local history library that has an archive. I was one of 2 interns they hired. Since I was in my 2nd semester of my library science master's, all my shifts were afternoon till close. And I had a gay part-time position on top of this and classes. The other intern already had his master's and was much more settled in his life. He had a wife and kids and a military background. He was actually really nice and I liked working with him. But because he worked the morning till afternoon shifts, he got a lot more time and training with our manager. Whereas for the majority of my shifts, like not even joking, I'd say maybe 98% of the time, our manager was in meetings and would just ignore me and eventually had a conflicting list of things I couldn't do. Don't ask coworkers questions, even though she was usually unavailable. Don't knock on her door. Don't ask her if we were still meeting. This one was because we were set to have a meeting and it was nearing the time, but she was talking to the person directly below her while I was waiting for her. And I just wanted to check we were still meeting since she had rescheduled teaching me how to catalog once or twice and that I couldn't work on another collection unless she approved it. But when I asked her if there was a collection I could work on, she'd say, "No, I don't think you're ready for that." The other thing that really infatuated me was that she'd say that, and then was surprised that I'd spend my shifts watching webinars on different aspects of archiving or reading about the history of the county. I still don't get her thought process there. She also emailed me and asked if I thought I should switch to a different library and children's services. In hindsight, I probably should have, but I believed that I could stick it out and I'd prove to her that I could learn and be an archivist. And then the straw that broke the camel's back. She asked me to make a finding aid for the collection I processed using Archives Space. I did what I could, but I'd never used it before and didn't have anything to go by. So she emailed me with edits to make after I emailed her saying, I think I'm done. And then when we met in person, she was like, oh, I didn't send you the guide, did I? Yeah, she had an entire guide on how to use Archive Space that she sent to the other intern, but not to me, and somehow expected me to be able to make it without knowing what to do. Yeah. She fired me 5 months in. It was supposed to be a year internship. She said she didn't think I was passionate about archives, that I was inattentive, and that I didn't belong in the archives field. So in summary, I was fired because she didn't like me. She spent 5 months making the job hell for me because I was constantly stressed and trying to figure out what to do to please her and like how to get her to train me. I think the worst part of the whole thing is that my coworkers liked her. I talked to the intern that had the job before me, and she liked her. The other intern liked her. It's just so weird that for whatever reason, we just didn't click like that. Though definitely the worst part was her saying that she didn't feel my passion for archives and that I didn't belong in the field. For one thing, the meetings I did have with her, she spent complaining about a giant collection. So I could say the same about her, and it's just, why would I be in the program to get the degree and have my concentration literally be one of the hardest and most unsupported by the school if I wasn't passionate or interested in archives? Anyway, that was last year. I'm good now. I worked at a bookstore the summer in between and then got another gay position that lasted my second year. I did get an unpaid internship, so I did get practical experience with an archive, and my supervisor was a lot more hands-on and understanding and actually willing to work with me. Now I've graduated and I have a job lined up. At the time, I really thought I was done for, like my career had ended before it got to actually begin because that library works a lot with the other historical buildings and the state archives. But honestly, everything turned out all right. Story 10. Because I wouldn't let my boss at a new job put my name on a nasty email, I called her out and said I don't speak to people that way. She was awful. I was happy to see that pink slip in her hand a week later. Story 11. They hired me, didn't give me any work to do, then fired me for not doing any work despite me asking for things to do. I was a junior PR associate then. Since I had nothing to do, I spent the time monitoring the social media pages of our brands to get insight. This was under my then superior's advice. One of the reasons why they fired me was, you spend too much time on social media while at work. Story 12. I worked at an ad agency as a copywriter. It was the industry equivalent of a Viking longship. Long hours, weekends, and crazy deadline. Yet somehow, an art director and I managed to land a couple of freelance accounts. Mind you, we did it with the permission of the agency president. I asked if we could do it. Hell, he let us even run media billings through the agency. So it wasn't as if we were doing it on the sly. Well, this same agency president was a bit handsy with the employees. He was caught by his wife diddling an account executive and divorced him. So he checked himself into a hotel with a pint of Rocky Road ice cream and a snub-nosed Model 8 and shot himself. Mind you, 10 months before that, the agency's head of accounts died in our largest client's private jet crash. The creative director comes out of rehab to take over the agency. He decides that because he can't handle his booze, everybody else needs to go through a 12-step program just the way he did. No, seriously, I'm not making this crap up. This actually happened. So the new agency president, the one straight out of rehab, decides it would be a fantastic idea for us to all go to a lodge on the top of a mountain and do a condensed 12-step program throughout a long winter weekend. Trust exercises, talking about our feelings, and the whole panoply of self-help crap. Holy duck, we couldn't even take our own cars. We had to take a bus so nobody would flee. After we returned from that festival of weirdness, my buddy and I continued working on our client stuff. Except now we're doing it with a little more urgency because we realize that the entire place is becoming even more unstable than before. Our freelance work stopped being a way to earn a little extra cash and was quickly becoming our escape hatch. Come awards showtime, we enter our client work into the competition, and our work totally killed it. Did way better than the agency's work. We had used fake names for our entries, so people wondered who the hell won the awards. We did so well that a couple of marketing directors figured it out and made discreet inquiries for us to do work for them. We had a couple of meetings, and of course, word got back to the agency. They fired us. When the axe fell, they were taken aback when I walked into the room, sized it up, and actually said, well, I was wondering when it would happen. I had already emptied my stuff from my office in anticipation of getting the heave-ho. The only thing I had to do was stroll by my office and get my car keys. For a couple of months, the employees at my former agency treated us like pariahs. But as the new president kept up his shenanigans and the 12-step bullcrap began to eat away at employee morale, more and more people would call us for drinks to test the waters. Sadly, my business partner died the following year from cancer. A day doesn't pass by when I don't think of him. But 2 years after that, my firm was kicking ass in the awards shows and peeling away clients from my former employer, who was such an unstable nutjob that nobody would work with him any longer. By the way, the agency we started, it was the kind of place that ran in a coherent way. It was rare to work past 6 o'clock. It became the kind of place where people wanted to work, with good pay, good working conditions, and the type of work that people were glad to have in their portfolios. Story 13. After my training and onboarding, I was only getting 2 shifts a week consistently for over a month. Asked for more, was given the, "We are unionized, we have to follow seniority. You've only been here 3 months, Sheil." So I went and got a second job and started telling the first one which of the 2 or 3 days a week I'd be available to work for them. Got let go for not being available for shifts 7 days a week. Story 14. A long time ago, I was fired from a massive retailer that's known for the color blue for time theft. Their own asset protection investigation showed I was actually owed hours above what I had clocked. A fair number of other heads rolled for that one, but they still refused to hire me back. Story 15. I accidentally snitched on myself. Used to work at Radio Shack, and I tried selling a personal cell phone to a friend, not realizing that the phone wasn't working properly. So I switched it with a brand new phone from our store. Months later, a Radio Shack internal affairs guy came in and said I confess up to what I did or basically get in trouble with the police. I told him about the phone thing. Well, as it turns out, he was there because the company suspected me of credit card fraud, which I did not do. So they fired me for the phone incident and made me pay back the full price of the phone. This was back in 2005. Story 16. The owner was from India. His son wanted Valentine's Day off to go to a 7-day wedding, but I already requested and had it approved. He crossed my name off the calendar and put his and told me if I wasn't there, I'd be fired. Expected me to pick up all his missing shifts the whole week. I picked up all his shifts, but I wasn't there on Valentine's Day. I was fired. Story 17. Changed my status to available for work inadvertently while job searching on LinkedIn. Was connected to HR at the firm and they saw it. I realized my mistake a couple hours too late, but they saw it and let me go. Honestly, was the best thing ever. I started my own business after it happened a year ago and I'm thriving. Thanks, a-holes. Story 18. Because I wouldn't lie to people. Worked for a cell service affiliate in college. Had the worst coverage, price, and customer service of any of the 4 major carriers in my area. Only feather in the cap was cool devices for the time. Sales expectations were high. Only way to get there was lie through your teeth. I refused. Spent most of my shifts unducking accounts other employees had ducked in order to get commission. Was actually relieved to get canned. Was destroying my mental health. Story 19. I worked in a disability care company for people who needed extra help in their homes. Came in after a few vacation days. There was note about a certain client being sick with a stomach flu, didn't think much of it. Found out I was working by myself that morning instead of the usual 3 staff simply due to managerial failure to schedule the correct number of people. There's a whole morning check-in thing, going around to each client's home to see them, administer medications if needed, or do any other things they need first thing in the morning. Like I said, usually 3 staff, I was doing all of them myself. Went to the sick client's house last because he lived further than everyone else. So the route just made more sense that way. Didn't come to the door. Got someone with a key to the apartment to open it, and there he is, dying on the floor. Still breathing kind of, but blue and unresponsive. Called paramedics. As soon as they moved him, he flatlined, and that was it. There was a regularly scheduled staff meeting the next day. During the meeting, the manager basically implied that I could have prevented the death and that I should think about what I could have done differently, knowing what I know now. Basically, no one is blaming you, but in hindsight, this is your fault. I went off on the manager right in front of the whole company. Mentioned how in the client logs on our website, how the manager himself had told off the client for refusing meds that had nasty side effects and insisted that's what made him sick. Had denied the client an ambulance when he asked for it because it was just the flu. How even though, yes, I did go to that client's home last, and yes, there's a better chance they would have survived if I had not, I should not have been doing 3 people's job by myself. How I had brought up that this person's file had an unfilled insulin prescription on it, despite the person not coming with a diabetes diagnosis and wanting this looked into by management. Turned out untreated diabetes was the cause of death. Anyway, yeah, I said all that and got fired a week later and told I was just never a good fit for the job, and a bunch of unrelated stuff was mentioned. Yeah, I wonder why. Story 20. Losing my crap one day and just trying to get back at the company. I was a TL for Target, and it's a very stressful job for the crap pay. Each year, Target asks their employees to donate money to one of several charities at any amount, but really try to push you to do something like $5, but to agree to have it pull from your check once per month for 12 months, so $60 or some amount like that. Really saying stuff like, it's only a cup of coffee per month. They don't hide it or be sneaky about it. They're all upfront about how it works. But they make it seem like the employee can write this off during tax season because they give you a receipt to show your donation. But surprise, surprise, Target claims the donation and takes the tax break so you can't. So I decided duck that and would inform my teams about this and tell them if they want to donate, go do it on their own directly. They don't need to donate through Target and give them another tax break just to fire us all later to hit their bottom line. Well, obviously my prissy sit in office all day SD and HR lead didn't like this, so they decided to pull a skeleton out of my closet they kept for a rainy day when I asked a coworker out. But they weren't interested and nothing ever went past that. We even had a great work relationship together for almost a year without it ever coming up again. But I guess she told a friend who told a friend that landed on HR's ear, and they kept that information for until they needed it and said they conducted an investigation into my work ethic and fired me for it, saying it counts as harassment. I just laughed and said, okay, WTF ever helps y'all sleep. Where's my check? Ended up doing me a huge favor doing that because being young at the time, I was stupid and was trying to move up in Target, but duck that crap. I now have a career in a field I'm actually interested in at a great company, making even more money with 20x less stress. Thanks for being a crafty company target. Story 21. My dad was dying, and the company didn't want me spending so much time helping him. I offered to have my dad die at a more conducive time for them, but they didn't take that well, so I changed my number in the company directive to a local pizza shop and got things in order. Story 22. My boss was creepy. She had tried to commit died at some point in her life and ended up getting her toes amputated, and she wore bad dentures. So she walked oddly, and those dentures were ill-fitting and brown. After learning this, I would give her compliments to make her feel good since surviving that and losing her toes and teeth. One day, she followed me in the bathroom and tried to hug me. I chuckled awkwardly and walked out. Then she was wanting to spend lunchtime with me. I started feeling uncomfortable and was trying to hide from her. Once when I was at my desk and she came in and walked up to me crying and pledging her love to me in front of everyone. I think she's been drinking. Her dentures were coming out and she had trouble standing up. I said no and please stop this as I'm strictly banana-ly. And she left the job sobbing. The next day she returned sober, called me in the office and fired me. As I was leaving, she started crying and saying she loved me. I for real feared she would show up at my home crying with her dentures hanging out, but she didn't. Another time was a restaurant job. The boss let me know he liked black women since his wife was black. We had tons of servers and staff, and he'd seem to appear out of nowhere and compliment me, standing as close to me as he could and seemingly whispering in my ear. One day, he outright said he wants to take me to bed. I was shocked since his wife worked there. I said, "You're married." He said, "No, my wife is." He wanted to take me to his place while she was at work, and I refused. I wouldn't consider it. I immediately got another job and started calling out, and he called me and said, "When will you return?" And I said, "I've got another job." And he replied, "Well, you're fired." Story 23. Because I wasn't very good at the job. I was originally declined for a promotion because I didn't have the experience and knowledge to do it. A few months later, the senior management team reached out to me. They indicated the position was still vacant as nobody else wanted it. They offered it to me. Only thinking about the dollars, I took it. I did the best I could, but wasn't effective at getting the desired results. 6 months in, I got called to a meeting with my supervisor. He candidly asked if, given more time, did I think I could get better at the job? I candidly answered him, no. The next day, I was terminated. Story 24. I was in pharmacy school and working as an intern at Walmart. To be a pharmacy intern, you have to register with the state and stay in pharmacy school. I had already had to repeat a semester and was on academic probation. Then I absolutely bombed one of my exams the following semester. I had 3 weeks before the final and needed a really high grade to not fail and get kicked out of pharmacy school. So I called my boss and told them I couldn't come into work because I needed to study. They said they understood and let me off. A couple days later, I got a call from my boss saying his boss told him that I would not be retained in the intern program that Walmart has. Didn't really matter as I ended up not getting the grade I needed and was kicked out of pharmacy school, so I would have been let go anyway. I did eventually get back in and was able to graduate, but I decided not to seek regular employment so I could focus on school. Story 25. Worked second shift for a beverage company as a shuttle driver. For 5 weeks, I couldn't get a fuel card and used 2 of the other drivers' fuel card. One day, they weren't there and had enough fuel to do 1 run instead of the usual 3-4. I called my supervisor, who was at home, and told me to figure it out, so packed my bag full of free soda and went home. The next morning, he calls me and asked why I didn't make the runs. I told him to get effed and hung up. Story 26. First time was from Walmart. I wouldn't kiss the manager's ass at all because he was a useless duckstick, and he made up reasons to fire me, including doctoring the time clock and cameras. A few months after I left, he got busted doing it again by the GM and fired. Second time was doing door-to-door frozen food sales, and some lady claimed I hit her stupid, expensive road bike. She claimed it was sitting across the road behind branches of a downed tree after a storm. When I said so, why was a several $1,000 road bike just left next to the road 300 yards from someone's house? She couldn't answer that, but I got blamed anyway. Story 27. I worked in a supermarket. Boss doesn't want us to work overtime. I finish at 4 p.m. and so I pack up at 15:55 as I need to get clear of the shelves. Boss see me in the reserve at 15:58 and ask me, why you are packing up? You have 2 minutes left. My contract get terminated the next fortnight. Story 28. The first time, I was a 21-year-old hostess at a new restaurant. I was in a sorority, and you have to take like 2 whole weeks every summer for recruitment. 1 week for training and practice, and another for the actual recruitment. It's incredibly exhausting. Most girls get really sick. I got so terribly, horribly sick, I had to skip our bid day activity, and it still breaks my heart. I slept for several days. I told the restaurant I was very sick and couldn't come back yet, and they said not to worry and to take the rest of the week off. The schedule for the next week comes out, and I show up as scheduled. Then about an hour into my shift, I got pulled into the back and fired for not telling them I was coming back. You gave me the week, I took the week, then showed up as scheduled. WTF. He also told me that they purposely hired too many people anyway. The second time, I fully deserved this one. The summer after my first year of law school. I was at a great school 4 hours from my crafty, abusive boyfriend who loved to guilt me. Home was 2 hours from him, and I got a job in a little law office near my hometown. Should have been great experience. But my ex didn't care that this summer was important and guilted me about not getting time together. So I got a retail job in his city as well. Every week, I had to finagle my schedule, driving back and forth every other day or so between the 2 jobs. Eventually, the law firm got sick of this and let me go. Totally understand. Story 29. I was trying to report my boss's boss to HR for harassing and bullying me. He was taunting me on a phone call with a client, making childish voices and rude statements about me while pressuring me to work faster than I had been in the moment. He would ask me if something was done while I was working on things throughout the call, demanding updates every 15 seconds or so. I left the call and told my boss I was reporting this guy to HR, and I was told I was fired instead. I ended up getting a call from HR the following week, and they hadn't yet been informed I had been fired. They opened a case on my behalf to look into these issues. Unsurprisingly, they investigated themselves and found themselves guilty of no wrongdoing. They did tell me I had been terminated due to issues with my professionalism. That was painful, hearing he'd completely reversed me. I hadn't at any point been unprofessional, as I take great pride in these types of things for some stupid reason. Call me old-fashioned, I suppose. This was so unexpected that it caused me a great deal of financial issues and completely tanked my credit in the process. Due to the time of year when it happened, it took nearly 4 months to start a new role and begin earning money again. I have so much debt now because of this guy bullying me directly, openly, and then immediately firing me for being unprofessional. Pro tip: if you're going to HR to report your boss's boss, do not tell your direct boss first. Corporate America will destroy you if you're a good person at heart. Story 30. I worked as the setup staff for my college's sporting events. Sounded cool at first, but it was horrible in reality. Insane micromanaging, yet at the same time operationally it was a cluster duck. I didn't have an actual set supervisor, and nobody seemed to ever know what the duck was going on. So the minute I got a new job, I went to put in my 2-week notice. I go to the HR office after class one day, and it was open, but no one was in there. I go the next day and same thing. So I left my written notice on the front desk and made sure to email them too. I didn't get scheduled for any games during those 2 weeks and just figured my time there was done. I got an email 8 months later saying, "You have been terminated for unexcused absences and are no longer eligible to work for insert higher education system again in any capacity." I reach out and they're like, "We recently discovered you haven't shown up for a game in months." I told them I submitted my resignation months ago, and they insisted I never did. What's funny is now, I work at a different school in the same state system in a professional job, and when I was getting screened for my interview, I'm not going to lie, I was a little worried it would duck everything. Luckily, it didn't. Story 31. Work Biotech. Was fired from my first job. I was originally in charge of package receipt at a smaller company, where race, and even SEs, were handling a lot of the logistics. We eventually purposefully hired a guy to handle a lot of these roles because they effectively were getting in the way of us doing sciencey stuff. Showed the guy the general ropes of where we receive shipments, how to distribute and logging receipts, etc. Well, 3 weeks later, I was pulled into the boss office and was told I was being fired. I wasn't necessarily mad, but more so confused, so I asked what made them come to that decision. Apparently that douche nozzle just blatantly forgot to check packages one day and voila, a multi-$1,000 and several months to manufacture specimen was left to thaw and die at the receiving area. I was fired, so I just protested that wasn't it, this guy's job to do all of that. Was told I was still expected to check in on him to make sure he did his job. Then just hit him with, the duck am I supposed to know if he did his job or not if we hired him in the first place for all of this? Got up and went to pack my shiz at my desk and walked out. I know it's not the most exciting story, but that's my only story of being fired. I have been laid off once though. Story 32. I told a whole lot of people to go duck themselves. HR, accounting, my manager, my manager's manager, and a security guard. Long story short, or short story long, they hired me the day the company decided to close down that office in 6 months. I decided to stay because even though I would have only been there a short time, I still would have gotten a severance package. They refused to give me any kind of training, didn't even assign me a company email, which was needed to sign in to do most of the work, expected me to complete large amounts of work even if it meant working overtime despite no training and no email. They wouldn't sign me up for direct deposit and would mail me my check. Other employees were getting mad at me because they had to pick up my slack, like it was my fault. I was hardly able to do any work and a bunch of other stuff. 4 months later, I was so tired of getting crap on by coworkers, not having received one paycheck, constantly getting written up and lectured for stuff out of my control, etc. So when I was 1 point away from being fired, I let everyone know exactly what I thought of them and told HR that every single one of my paychecks better be in my mailbox within 48 hours, or I'm taking it to court. They must have realized how badly they ducked up because that night, someone showed up to my door with all my paychecks. Story 33. I was asked by the corporate VP of retail displays, or whatever that job is called, to stop mindlessly folding jeans and go take down an whole area, change the fixtures, and set it up to look like a 3D rendering he handed me. Well, some snitch-ass Karen, who had grand dreams of being a minimum wage supervisor, told the shift manager I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Instead of coming to me and asking why I was in the wrong section, the manager cut my hours to 2 4-hour shifts. When I approached him about it, he was super deflective and kept saying, "We can talk about this later." I told him, "Later's in 7 days. I can't afford to live on this schedule." He said, "I think you should go home and don't bother coming back to your next shift." Mind you, this was happening loudly in the middle of the sales floor. Well, I took my store color polo off, threw it in the short, fat turd's face, and marched to the locker room, which was the farthest corner from where we were, packed my crap, and left. The thing is, I was the VP's guy. He would always come to me for these fire drills, and I always came through. He called me, apologized, offered me more money, and busted the shift manager down to supervisor of a useless section where he managed a team of himself. I'd already gotten a good job in my actual industry of advertising, so I didn't go back. Story 34. I was working 2 jobs at the time. A manager at my part-time job didn't like me, so he changed my schedule so I'd have to work the same days as my main job. He did this after my shifts were over for the week, so I'd not see the change. I came to work on Monday and was informed I no-showed 3 days in a row and was fired. Honestly, I was relieved. Working 76 hours a week was too much. Story 35. I pushed 10 carts at a time at Target when the maximum is supposed to be 7. They were the last 10 carts in the lot, and I didn't feel like making 2 trips was necessary. Got fired the next day. Story 36. I got hired by a company for a technical data entry position, but in the middle of training, I got pulled out of the room and was assigned to sort mail and stuff envelopes. Yes, those were the only tasks for the position. Thing is, I'm very quick and efficient with my work. It's one of my strengths, and I'm proud of it. This position was so easy. A monkey could do it, and within no more than 3 hours into my day, I was all done with my tasks. So, since I didn't want to get in trouble for sitting on my ass and not doing anything the rest of the day, I would constantly go to my boss and ask for more work. This went on for 2, maybe 3 weeks at most. Then one day I get a phone call that I've been let go. When I asked the reason, I was told it was because I kept asking for more work. At another job, I was fired because someone apparently got offended when they overheard me explaining the premise of the anime Death Note to a coworker who asked me about it. The explanation given to me when the manager was letting me go was that this person was uncomfortable with my witchcraft book. I was like, what? Apparently they thought I had an actual book where if I write someone's name in it, they actually die. Like, how stupid can you be? Story 37. I've been fired 3 times. Firing 1 came when I was a misguided youth and took a job working at a hot wing joint and decided to treat my friends to an all-you-can-eat serving of wings and beer. Firing 2 came when I was moonlighting as a stuntman for an independent film. It's on Amazon Prime Video called Chrome Total B Movie, but was a great experience. And I was working all night for weeks at a time and still going to work the next day as a do-it-all-fix-it guy for a major depth store downtown Seattle. I was tired as hell, so I slept on a couch in the back of the break room. Didn't wake up in time for my shift and the Karen secretary ratted me out. Firing 3 came when I was in charge of a project getting a machine repaired for a high-rate production facility. They wanted it done quick, cheap, and correctly. I told them those 3 don't go together. So I picked cheap and correct. Turns out it wasn't moving fast enough, so the newly hired manager scolded me for it. At this point in my life, I didn't need to take it. So I told him if he didn't like it, he could fire me. He did a day later after I took a scheduled day off. Story 38. Because the boss's son was a lazy liar. When I was in high school, I worked Friday and Saturday nights from midnight to 6 a.m. at a 7-Eleven. The worst part of it was dealing with people that wanted to buy beer after 2 a.m. on Sunday, but almost as onerous was having to put together the Sunday New York Times. It was delivered in about a dozen sections, each on neatly strapped into a pile. I had to take each section and put them all inside the main section. It was dull and repetitive and took half the night to put together hundreds of them. One night, the NY Times was not delivered. I advised my relief, the boss's son, of this when he arrived in the morning and went on my way. Come next Friday, I went into work as usual and found the boss there, which was strange in and of itself. He told me that I was fired for not putting the Times together the previous week. I told him that they were never delivered and that I told his son about this. My brother, who worked the same shift I did, was standing right there and backed up my account. The guy fired me anyway, at which point my brother quit, which meant that the boss and his son had to work our shifts until they hired some more people. Story 39. Only time I ever got officially fired from a job was from the Children's Museum of Manhattan. I worked coat check and was specifically told that on rainy days, strollers needed to be folded by the parents before they could be checked in. I told a parent this, and this parent became a Karen. This took place way before the term Karen became a thing. After a pretty long time of complaining about why she shouldn't have to fold her stroller, I simply told her that in the amount of time she spent complaining, she could have folded her stroller, been checked in, and been in the museum. She complained straight to the top, and I got fired because of it. Only other job that fired me. I quit before they fired me. I was working two jobs with priority at my other job. This job I had only been at for a couple of months, and the managers I had were douches who wanted me to prioritize the new job over the one I actually wanted to be at. I pushed for a promotion at the job I was prioritizing. Finally got it when there were shifts they needed me to cover, but told them I couldn't because of my other job. Quit the other job the day I got promoted. Story 40. Because I smelled bad. They weren't wrong. I had just recently moved out on my own for the first time. Nobody was really encouraging me to take care of myself. I was struggling with depression and just didn't bother. It was pretty duck and embarrassing. Story 41. Boss apparently didn't know I had a lazy eye, but able to control it consciously. I was at this job for 3 years without an incident. Transporting materials, calls me in and asks me about my vision. Tell him I'm legally blind in right eye, but have been driving since I was 10. Said, we can no longer continue with you being employed here. Was so out of my mind, didn't even think to lawyer up. But foo them, their new driver accidentally pierced 4 vehicles with the long forks within 1 week. Story 42. I told them in March I'm taking a week off in May. May comes and they tell me they can't approve it because we were short-staffed. I remind them that we were short-staffed when everyone else took their vacations this year and didn't complain. So come May 15th, I'm out of here. They acted weird for a week after I got back before dropping the news. Wasn't even mad. I was part-time, consistently pulling 32 to 38 hours, thinking of reporting them to the Department of Labor. Story 43 called out the CEO for being an insolent piece of crap for making jokes about 9/11. On 9/11, on Long Island, where many of those murdered that morning lived, one a cul-de-sac in my town, 3 of 4 fathers didn't come home that day. People were dead, dying, and thousands missing. Everyone in that room for lunch, about 20 of us, had someone they knew who was lost, and many more who were not yet found. I told him duck you in no uncertain terms, that people were dealt with death and missing people, and our nation was under attack. It didn't happen immediately, but within a month, I was gone. And this guy was a total piece of crap, a genius with a heart of coal who enjoyed making others as miserable as he was inside. Story 44. I was a wastewater drinking water operator in charge of the facilities at a local college. I was fired so that they could give my job to a person to be able to get them a visa to stay in the country. This was around the time of COVID, and they were having issues finding jobs for people they wanted to retain. While this guy had an impressive education, he was not certified to the job. There are several state licenses required. They initially offered for me to stay on as a crew member at less pay and use my licenses. To the HR rep's shock, I declined and told them I either kept my job or left. They chose to let me go. I called the state governing body on my way home and informed them that I was no longer in charge of that facility. To the university's shock, they discovered it took a fair amount of time, educational courses, and work hours to get the licenses. I think they thought they would just stick their guy in an office for a few years until they could place him somewhere else. Story 45. It was my 3rd day in a small warehouse that supplied ingredients to local pizza places. I was instructed to get a box that had a bag full of crushed red pepper and fill some shakers. The bottom of the box came apart and the bag fell, hitting the ground and scattering the pepper flakes everywhere and filling the air with dust. My eyes, throat, nose, and lungs were almost immediately on fire. A coworker escorted me to the bathroom where I started having a coughing fit and throwing up. I couldn't see. I could barely breathe. And then the bathroom door bursts open, and the owner is screaming at me about the pepper flakes and how much money I had just cost him. Duck that guy. His business went under a year later. Story 46. I just got fired from the job I'd been at for over 10 years last Monday. I am 33 years old, so I basically spent my entire adult working life there. I watched as the upper management slowly made the place miserable. It was an office-type state job. I hadn't gotten a raise in 4 years. No one was ever replaced. The work just fell on the rest of us. I just stopped putting in any effort to meet their constantly changing expectations. Took 4 years, but they finally let me go. I had seen the writing on the wall, though, and had already lined up something else to start in a few weeks. This has been the best vacation ever. Story 47. Worked at Rite Aid. Some scammers came with stolen gift cards that were actually accepted by the system, and they made a huge purchase. Obviously, I was suspicious, and the manager approved the transactions. A month later, I was let go stating I wasn't vigilant enough. Story 48. I had endured low-level bullying from my boss for months. Nothing was right, constantly monitoring me. One day, I made a relatively minor mistake in an email that had to be sent to a client. CNP'd incorrect data, corrected it, and sent a follow-up email within 10 minutes saying, "My bad, here's the correct info." He lambasted me via email and I lost it. I said to a friendly colleague, if he was here, and then stopped. This was overheard by another manager who reported to my manager that I was threatening to assault him. Cue a dismissal hearing, chaired by my manager. I was out of my ear within 30 minutes. I pursued a formal complaint with HR, had a meeting. They offered me my job back. I told them, never in a month of Sundays. Last I heard, manager bloke left the company shortly after and was running his own minicab company. I hope all his minicabs break down. Story 49. I've only ever been fired due to a redundancy. It happened twice. The first one, they had to lean out the org to prepare for the next round of investment. This meant cutting back on 75% of their workforce and only keeping leads from each team. The second one was because the company and their digital product were literally useless. The whole time I was there, they weren't cash flow positive, and constant fear-mongering and reactive decision-making from upper management resulted in a product that was clunky, consisting of half-baked features and losing paid customers on a daily basis. They made around 35% of the team redundant, which was based on the projects that they felt were no longer a priority for them. First one was a shame because I loved working there. And the second one, well, everyone below upper management were great, but it was the best thing for my mental health to leave that place. Story 50. Got fired because my company hired replacements while I was recovering from cervical disc replacement under workers' comp from an injury that happened while on the job at that company. Story 51. I worked for a European swine genetics company. One of our selection and multiplication nuclei was outsourced to a neighboring country, when animals of high genetic value had to be shipped to a customer. I would go to the farm and spend the day grading, sorting, and marking the animals to be loaded on the truck. Once, a client rightly complained about the poor quality of the animals we had sent them. I went to see them, and their identification numbers did not match the ones I had registered in my notebook. The farm had replaced them with others and, in turn, had sold the ones I had selected on their own. After a meeting between my company and the managers of the multiplication farm, it was decided that we would continue to work together and that I would be the scapegoat for the customer. I was fired. Story 52. Worked at a startup. And these were their words verbatim. You're too soft on the team. We need someone that can come in every day at 7 a.m. First off, upper management, business bros, goes over my head and drives my team to the bone. We're talking 10-hour sporadic shifts trying to sell and demo their product to investors every month or so. My team appreciated my efforts to protect them from the bullcrap. Second, no one is in the office until 9. Basically, I wasn't a yes man and cracking the whip. Also ducked the product management guy. He was trying to get me fired, and it worked just because I challenged his ideas on how to do my job. He was good friends with one of the founders. Story 53. Got fired because the company owner sent an email to our branch manager about pricing. He seeded our branch's small sales team and also included some unknown person at a different company in another state. I am a stupidly curious person, so I did some digging in our point-of-sale system and found that we sold multiple orders to that out-of-state company worth tens of thousands of dollars for stock codes that didn't exist in our computer system. It was particularly interesting because our branch never sells to anybody out of state. I took screenshots of one of the transactions, thinking there was something nefarious to find, like improper business loans or tax evasion. Somehow the IT guy caught me. I was put on paid leave within a couple of days while they investigated. They ended up firing me for stealing company property, transaction data. Story 54. Owner's granddaughter graduated from college with a degree in accounting. I knew they were going to fire me and bring her in. Also, I asked the owner for a private meeting at her house. We needed money. She gave it to me. Said she couldn't tell anything to her kids. President and vice president but pretty sure she did. I was glad, actually. The president, owner's son, liked to splurge on equipment he had no business buying. They were so far in the red, and the owner, woman in her 70s, floated that company for several years. Story 55. Sent an email to my boss late one night while on call after dealing with a ticket in which I had no idea how to respond. In the email, I told boss that I was a bit overwhelmed because of some of these tickets I'd never dealt with and asked for more training on them. 2 weeks later, on a Monday morning, I have an assistant to train on day-to-day things. Wednesday, HR lady corners me in the parking lot and tells me that my assistant is really my replacement. She also tells me to let my manager fire me so she can file the paperwork so I can get unemployment. Friday, I was fired. I got fired for asking for training on an unfamiliar problem. Story 56. Company was going through a restructuring and asked if I was willing to quit. They thought it was more ethical for some reason. I argued and said that if they wanted me gone, they had to fire me and give me a severance package, and they obliged after I made a big fuss about it. I found out later that a handful of people were also asked to quit. They sent in their resignation letter and weren't going to get a severance package until I told them about what I did. Forced the company to give us all a severance package due to redundancy. Then called the CEO a man-child and held him accountable during our last company roundup. Pretty proud of myself, Angel. What a thrill. Story 57. Was a supervisor for one department and was sleeping with a supervisor from another department. We would hook up in the car on breaks. Plant manager 1 week before I was fired, did my evaluation, which was the highest in my plant and top 10 for the entire company, received a 6-month pay increase. Termination was for not fulfilling my job duties. Story 58. It's literally just for being a man. I worked at a local bookstore. Me and this other dude got hired to help with the Christmas season rush and because they needed people that could lift more than 50 salves. After 5 weeks, me and the only other dude got called into the owner's office and basically got told that we were being let go for performance issues, which was a bunch of bull. Also, the other reason was because the other employees, which were all women, didn't feel too comfortable around two dudes and that we didn't fit into the work culture. From me and that dude's perspective, we worked hard, were respectful and positive. Honestly, I'm glad they fired me because I got an even better job. Story 59. I asked them to pay me the wage they promised. Technically, I quit as they were happy to keep me on for duck all money. I just refused to deal with that. Then, 4 years later, I was actually fired because of poor or very inconsistent performance. What they didn't know is I was severely mentally ill and had multiple medication changes that ducked with my head completely. I have no ill will and still think the firing was justified as I couldn't do my job properly. They also didn't try to burn bridges or be a holes about it. No attacking, no shaming me, etc. Close friend worked there for years after, and I shopped there until I moved away. Story 60 was working at FedEx just part-time and I couldn't come in multiple days in a row because I had such bad back pain that I could barely walk, let alone stand up. I explained this to my manager and he told me he agreed with my decision 2 days later. All of my shifts were taken off my schedule without any call or text to let me know why. I called my manager to ask why. He said I was fired for not coming into work. These were the only days I ever missed there. But the fact I had to call them for them to tell me I was fired really pissed me off. Story 61. Worked at a Menards. We had an online schedule. Go to check it on Sunday to see what I worked that week. Completely blank. Okay, well, I'll call my department manager. Called her, told her my online schedule is blank, asked her what I worked that week. Oh, it's online. Just check the portal, and hung up on me. So I gave it an hour, checked again, still blank, called her back. She got pissed at me for wasting her time and hung up again. I went into the store to check the paper schedule behind the desk. She saw me and fired me on the spot for harassing her. Story 62. Worked at a gun store for a minute in my 20s. Boss was in his late 50s, and his wife was about 5 years older than I was. As I was bending over to close the floor gun safe, the boss's wife complimented my butt. The boss's office door was open. Fired the next morning and he attempted to deny my unemployment claim. Fired for cause. What cause? Because. Story 63. This was pre-GPS. I worked at Domino's and I used to call customers and give them my location via Crossroads I was at and ask them to guide me to their house. I lasted 2 weeks there. Story 64. I started working at a rough time of my life and had to force myself to cope with personal issues while trying to work. I took a few too many sickies along the way. Story 65. I worked at a shelter for homeless teens. Admin staff were some of the most incompetent humans I've ever worked for. I started raising hell because there was no accountability for the administration. They kept ducking up and doing nothing when crap like this would go down. They scheduled a meeting to talk to me about my concerns while I was on vacation and then fired me for not showing up. Still makes my blood boil to think about it. Story 66. My supervisors wanted me to work miracles. I was supposed to work with clients for 12 hours a week, despite the fact that I only had 8 clients max and only half would agree to meet with me regularly. I didn't have any control over how many clients I had. It was productivity requirements set by some higher-ups, so I'm sure they were getting pressured, but I felt super unsupported. I quit before they fired me, but they were very much about to fire me. Story 67. I caught my boss falsifying an employee's substances test, so I asked HR what should I do. She said to talk to his boss, so then went to his boss, who called me a liar and told me I must be mistaken. So I went back to HR, where it was never mentioned again, until the end of that year, in which I could nothing right, apparently. And the undermining was one of the things brought up during my termination meeting. Also, my bosses didn't like me asking too many questions or my disciplining my employees when safety policies were broken. Story 68. I worked at a museum that had been planning their new building for about 3 years before I came. They fired my department, custodian, event coordinators, people who made security badges, and the department that make orders for what the museum needs because they never budgeted their money to present to the city. $40 million museum. So they had to present to the city about half in April, and they didn't have it, so they fired 4 departments in January to see if they could make a difference with our salaries put back into the new building budget. Story 69. Pandemic. And most recently, the interest rate environment as I pivoted into the mortgage space after getting through COVID. I'm really starting to doubt my ability to work, as it's been 4 years of this really grueling time finding gainful employment. All this in the land of opportunity. I really wish I could find a stable, well-paying job where I enjoy the work and people I work with. It's been my dream since getting to college 13 years ago, and I'm writing this as a way to manifest it. Story 7. Had to work harder than everyone else because I was a very fast worker. One day I complained why it is that way and got demanded to take the trash out, which is not my work at all. We have own personal for that. Things got worse with time, as I complained even more why I get treated so bad. After that, I knew I wouldn't be there much longer, so I stole new shoes, gloves, pens, sticky notes, and then waited till they said I can go. Workers of Reddit. What is your best, well, I'm getting fired moment at work? What were the consequences? I worked at an automotive parts manufacturing factory while going to art college, and part of my job was boxing up parts and attaching a tag onto the box with thin wire. But for every box I completed, one every couple hours, I sculpted a little animal out of the wire with needle nose pliers. I gave the little sculptures, bears, rabbits, whatever, to random employees, which they left on their workstation. One day, as I was making one of the little sculptures, I looked over my right shoulder to see my supervisor standing directly behind me, just watching me with a clipboard. I paused, looked her dead in the eye, held out the sculpture and said, "Want a bear?" She fired me on the spot. I'm now an animator at Disney. Story 2. I was a legal secretary. My boss was excited about our new big money case with a new big money client, Plaintiff Smith. Boss had 3 attorneys write a 6-page letter to our client outlining exactly how we were going to cream Defendant Jones. The letter included possible counterattacks and legal citations and basically our entire strategy. Meanwhile, I was poring over docs we received regarding Defendant Jones. I was asked to mail the strategy letter to our client, Plaintiff Smith. Oh, biggie. Just put it in an envelope, right? I knew he lived on Maple Drive, so I pulled his address from some papers on my desk and mailed that sucker out. Next day, I'm poring over those Defendant Jones docs again, and my blood ran cold. No one had told me that Jones and Smith were next-door neighbors. The address I'd pulled was Jones. I'd mailed our entire strategy to the opposing side. I immediately called their local post office and used my lunch break to drive there for the next 2 days. People at my office knew my mistake. I think I wasn't fired immediately because there was some chance I might fix it. Everyone avoided me or gave me tight-lipped smiles. Miraculously, the postmaster finally located the letter. The carrier had it in her bag on the 3rd day and brought it back to the post office where I was waiting. I gave the postmaster a $25 gift card and my tearful gratitude. My boss, who had avoided me, finally broke the silence and said, "I cannot believe you ducking found that letter." It became a crazy story around the office, and I was not fired. Story 3. I worked at a movie theater in high school. I'm blind in one eye and used to be sensitive about it. Got in an argument with a coworker at the theater, but didn't really think anything of it. Later on, I was going down the hall to get more ice and passed him as he was tearing tickets for customers. He muttered "Cyclops" as I passed, just loud enough for me to hear, so I immediately turned around and punched him in the face in front of his line of customers. Never saw managers run so fast. Story 4. Worked at a pet store. Manager asked me to move a koi from one tank to another. Big, giant $100 koi rips through the net, lands headfirst on the ground, and flops twice before dying. Manager and I made eye contact, and all he said was, "That's the first one I bought when I started the store." His name was Patches. He went into the office and gently closed the door. I grabbed my jacket, waved to the others, and left. Story 5. Worked at Taco Bell. Background. People generally consider me very mild-tempered and kind. One night was particularly stressful. It wasn't unusual for us to kind of beat on the touchscreens a bit, but I got mad and punched one. Mind you, it wasn't a full-blown OMG punch. It was more like if your buddy made fun of you and you kind of annoyingly punched his shoulder. The screen shattered and the touch screen but started ringing up hundreds of, coincidentally, fruit punches. The girl working next to me saw the screen shatter and saw my hand bleeding and looked at me like she thought I had just started a rampage and was about to go after her. I got fired 3 times that night. Each manager, store, district, then regional, fired me, yelled at me, then calmed down and said that since I had been a good worker, they would let me stay if I paid for it. I paid for it, took a couple of paychecks to replace a touchscreen computer on 2002. Story 6. I had the bright idea to shoot off a potato gun in the parking lot of my company. I fired a few rounds across the road when the maintenance manager came running out screaming at me. I then realized I was shooting a firearm on company property. Doesn't matter, it's potatoes and right guard, it is still a projectile. My fellow supervisors, who were watching all, disappeared. Went back to my desk to await my manager. All I got was a, "I trust this will not happen again" email. Still work for the company, and it occasionally gets brought up on my work anniversary. Story 7. I was working in a movie theater, and we found a phone inside. It was a flip phone. Nothing special. We kept a hold of it until the owner claimed it, and for some bonehead reason, I decided to take a picture of my junk on it. Made it the background photo. So whenever someone unsuspecting opened it up, bam, there's my junk. Coworkers thought it was hilarious and wanted to see it too. Next day, we're all preparing for work when our manager comes in and says, "All right, who did it?" and looks around at us. I feign ignorance and ask, "Who did what?" He replied, "The junk. Who took a picture of their junk and put it on the phone?" I denied it was me and everyone else kept mum. Later on that day, he approached me privately, pun intended, and said he knew it was me, knowing I couldn't hide it anymore. I questioned him as to how he knew it was me, and he explained that the background made him realize it was taken in the employee restroom, and he narrowed it down from there. Holy crap. I felt bad, but he gave me a pat on the back and told me never to do it again. I somehow kept my job. Story 8. My dad has a great one. He was a busboy at a restaurant, and it was his first day on the job. The place was packed, and he was rushing back with a ton of dishes. Somehow the tray to carry them fell, and all of the dishes fell to the floor with a loud crash. Everyone looked over at my dad. My dad saw that there was one lone dish intact, picked it up, held it out at arm's length, then dropped it. It broke. Everyone in the restaurant applauded. He was then fired. Story 9. In high school, I worked at an AM radio station in my small town on Sunday morning. I was the only person there from 6 a.m. to noon. It was mostly reading the weather and playing pre-taped program. At one point, I play a live broadcast of a Catholic Mass going on. During that time, I would crawl into a ball in the break room couch and doze off, hungover from the night before. One Sunday, I wake up to Hawkeye 1200. You can't sleep on the job. I sit up and see the boss who runs the station standing over me with a frown. But I wasn't sleeping, I say. Just when I think he might buy it, he says, "You have an alarm clock next to you." Oh yeah, I brought in an alarm clock that I'd set so I didn't oversleep. Hard to explain that one. I thought I was screwed, but somehow he didn't fire me. I worked there another month and then left for college. Story 10. I worked for a small computer company, doing a couple million a year in sales. One of my tasks was to update price listings and have those changes reflect on our vendors' websites. I put one less zero on one computer model and ended up costing our company $30,000 in about one day. Someone had noticed the error and bought a crap ton of computers. Even though there was a QA process to catch these things after me, I knew I was getting fired. I should say that my boss was actually pretty cool about it, but they had to put the blame on someone. He told me I could still use them as a reference and that I could label the position as a short-term contract. Story 11. I had just started work in the field as a natural gas technician. I'm normally a model employee at every job I have, but this one started off a little shaky. First day while making a K-turn, I backed the company truck into a ditch and bottomed it out. Bosses had to drive out 45 minutes from the office to pull me out. They were obviously pissed, but for some reason, they decided to keep me aboard. Strike 1. Second day at my last house of the day, I managed to lock my keys in the truck. On-duty boss had to leave home, drive all the way to the office to get the spare keys, and come unlock my door. Strike 2. Third day, no incident. Fourth day at my first house of the day, while bleeding the gas line inside the house, the gas ignites. Totally burns out the AC unit. This is it, I'm fired. There's no way I keep my job after this. Boss comes to the house, looks at it, looks at me and said, "Man, you ducked up." The next day I was told to stay home, and thus concluded the worst first week on the job I've ever heard of. Best part, Somehow I didn't lose my job, but instead went on to be the best tech they had and worked there for over a year before moving on to better things. Story 12. I was young and I had just gotten my first full-time job at an awesome company. It was a small .com startup, and those of us in customer support, about 5 people, had a running gag with the NOC team, about 5 people. We called them knock gits, and they called us pool boys, even though I was the first female on the customer support team. On a dare from my supervisor, Reed, not real manager, I went into the company's alias list and set up knock gits to go to the NOC alias, and pool boys to go to us. The sysadmin saw the file change and saw who changed it. Third day of work, I got a stern talking to. I went white as I saw my dream job slipping away. He saw how freaked out I was getting and said, "Calm down, you're not going to get fired for this or anything." Before proceeding to go further, he then called in my supervisor and gave him a real stern talking to as well. I ended up becoming great friends with that sysadmin and spent 6 wild years at that company. Story 13. I was working at a cozy sandwich, soup, and salad place and had asked to leave early the previous day since my uncle died. I went back to work and was still in a state of shock and couldn't check my baggage at the door. I had this horribly Karen lady change her order 4 times during the lunch rush when I had a line out the door. I couldn't take it anymore and told her to either order or to get the duck out of my line. My manager heard me. Before he could say anything, I took my apron and hat off, handed it to him, and grabbed my stuff and left. Story 14. I worked for a privately owned restaurant deli. The owners were married and terrible people. I would get a phone call and be demanded to work in the next few hours on threat of being fired if I quit. Anyways, one day I got in a big deal of trouble for giving a customer double meat without charging him. Now, I don't mean talking to in the back office. I mean full-on being screamed at in front of customers. Anyways, after I back-talked, I was let go in front of a line of prospective buyers. As I walked to the top of the store, I looked over my shoulder and proudly said to my bosses, "I pooped in the cookie dough." This was a lie, but they didn't know it. We had a huge vat of it in the back. Our cookies were very popular, so it was a big deal to them. My coworker eventually told me, and the husband and wife devil duo looked through the dough and couldn't tell what chocolate chip was and what was my poop, even though I never actually did it. They threw out the whole vat, 500 on 1,000, and felt good, on threat of being fired if I didn't show up. I don't know how quit got in there. Story 15. I use Adium to manage my MIAs while I'm at work. I'm a developer. I was speaking to a project manager at a new job. I'd been there for maybe a month. She was asking me to do some tedious work that was completely unnecessary because they promised it to a client. While frustrated, I tabbed over to my girlfriend's I'm to complain how frustrated I was that they were making us do all this work for basically nothing. Unfortunately, I didn't tab over. I sent the I'm to the PM. My heart sunk into my stomach, saw the little icon that showed she was typing, and was like, oh crap, how do I cover this up before she responds? I reread the comment and noticed I used a lot of pronouns. So when she responded, she thought I was talking to her about the client. Dear Lord, I thought I'd ruined my awesome new job right after it started. Story 16. I am a police dispatcher, and one time at work I was working the desk and toys for TOTS workers came in. My boss joked that I should eyed them to make sure they weren't thieves. We laughed, and the gentleman took the 10 trash bags full of toys and left. Later that night, a man called and asked when they could pick the toys up. After telling him that 2 guys already picked the toys up, he informed me that we had most likely been robbed. He asked if I had ID'd them, and I said no. He spoke to my boss, and my boss then informed me that we would probably be on the news since a police station was robbed, which was ironic, and he flipped out on me. It turns out it was an off-duty cop calling to play a prank on me. Story 17. I work at a university. A vice president brought a minority student to my office. Said, minority student complained that I had refused to help him because I was racist. I'd actually denied the student's request because, as I'd explained to the student earlier, I wasn't permitted to fulfill his request as he hadn't paid to join the program that gave him access to what he wanted. He had thanked me for checking things out for him and answering his questions, and then left. So I was quite surprised when he came back with an irate vice president in tow. I made an exception at the vice president's request, and then spent 3 very tense days explaining my actions to my boss and her boss. It led to my boss having a meeting with the helpful vice president about why we couldn't issue $1,000 pieces of equipment to people who hadn't paid us any money for the use of them, and why my department heads didn't feel like they should fire me for following department policies. Story 18. Creepy male boss put his arms around me during an outing. I automatically shrugged him off. Consequences? Well, a few weeks later, I started overhearing rumors that my clients were complaining about my job performance. I haven't gotten any complaints from or had serious problems with any, so that was odd. Then, my $3 million client got transferred to my coworker, who's always had his tongue shoved deep in that creepy boss's ass. Things turned out great, though. I was lucky since another boss, who's frequently in competition with him, decided to take a gamble and absorb me into his team. His gamble paid off. Creepy boss tried getting rid of another new employee. The guy was a seasoned hire, refused to suck up. The CEO was confused since the guy has lost 4 people in a team of 2 in just 3 years. And if he got rid of that guy, it'll be 5 within 3 years. Since I was the only employee he got rid of that's still in the bank, he asked about my job performance. This happened in a meeting where he's off on vacation and can't defend himself for about 2 weeks. The other unit heads smelled the blood and quickly bullcrafted praises about me. They told the CEO I was a genius, clients adored me, several operations heads lovingly talked about how popular I was with operations, unlike most relationship managers. The treasury head talked about how he spotted my talent in my first year, and everyone was so upset he lost the bid to absorb me into his team. Basically, tons of bullcrap. The CEO came to the conclusion that this guy sucked as a boss and only got to where he is through tons of ass licking. I got to know all this because my boss was so gleeful about the backstabbing session, he couldn't resist gloating to me. When creepy boss mentioned another big bank wanted him, trying to negotiate for a counteroffer, the CEO just said, "Do they want you? You will not be on my list of people to poach." The CEO's secretary loves to gossip and told everyone he didn't get a counteroffer and had to leave. Story 19. I'm a medical equipment repair technician. One night I was working on an exam light that was hanging from the ceiling in an operating room. I had a bit of it apart and was inspecting the connection between the big light head and the arm that it was suspended from when a clip popped out. The light head dropped to the floor. The arm is spring-loaded and it shot up and shattered the ceiling, and 5 or 6 lights showering the operating table, anesthesia cart, and myself in ceiling tile, plastic and glass. At first I was in shock, and what just happened didn't register in my brain. I reached down to pick up the light head, which is about 3 inches across, and grabbed the arm with my other hand. While trying to put them back together, I realized I'm coating everything in blood. The OR staff came running in and just saw me surrounded by destruction and covered in my own blood. Fortunately, the charge nurse had a sense of humor. Story 20. Well, this was actually kind of funny. I was hoping I didn't get fired and no one confronted me because it was not really my fault. I lived in fear of the day people would finally notice, though. My company came around the call center and took pictures of people in their everyday lives in order to put on our website. Well, me being cheery and dressed in a cute dress that day, I somehow managed to be on the front of our website as the face of our company. We have a few 100,000 visitors to our website a month. Little did they know, if you looked really closely at the writing on my desk, you could see I had a bumper sticker that said, "Life is too short to argue with stupid people." And I had Reddit open on my desktop. Win. Story 21. I work in a furniture store, mainly in the warehouse. We sell expensive crap. Like, the cheapest lamp you'll find is $100, and that's because it is damaged slightly. We had received a shipment of a very expensive set, all for a model home we were staging. I had a china cabinet, still boxed, on our forklift. It was set on a pallet upright on its side so that it was very tall and not very wide. I was bringing it into the warehouse, being super careful. Well, we have a sunken manhole right in front of the warehouse garage door. The front right wheel of the forklift went right into the dip, and I watched that 300 box of wood and glass teeter, rock, and fall flat on the ground. It made a solid thunk, and I knew it was all over. It turned out to have a not sad ending. The lady in charge of damages knew it was an accident and ordered a new one right away. No worries or anything, but when we received the new piece, my manager wouldn't let me near it. Story 22. Ruined 2 rolls of photo paper, about $500 a piece, during a second consecutive double shift. I was a cashier at CVS in high school. Background, the store was open 24 hours, but there was a group of people who worked nights and a group of people who worked days. Since I was in high school, I was 16, maybe 17 at the time, and worked the day shift. Days were 7 a.m., 10 p.m. So when I say double shift, I mean 7 a.m., 10 p.m. 15 hours, 2 30-minute breaks ends up being 14 hours total. We also had a photo processing machine that is older than me. It was those old ones where the photo paper can't be exposed to the light, so if you had to change the paper, you had to stick the old paper box that held the paper for the machine and the lightproof box holding the new paper into a lightproof bag, and without looking, change the paper. It's roughly a 15-minute process start to finish once you get good at it. Can take upwards of 45 when you first start. Cashiers also ran the photo department, so you did both. The manager at my store was a retired special victims detective, apparently like Law and Order, but got pissed if you asked him that. Who you didn't want to get pissed off at you. Story. It was the weekend of grad night and graduation. I was the only cashier not graduating that weekend. As such, I had to work 2 double shifts, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. About halfway through the second one, the paper ran out while I was printing pictures from a set of negatives. Yeah, people still do get negatives developed. and had to change the paper. I called the manager to cover my register while I changed the paper and ran to the back to get the box. I changed the paper, only to realize I had grabbed the wrong kind of paper. It's got matte instead of glossy. Had to recall the manager and switch everything around to get it fixed, or so I thought. As the pictures started printing, I noticed they hid this slight pink line on one side. I asked my manager and he just looked at me like, oh, for sake, and told me I had ruined the roll by exposing it to the light. I don't know what I did, but clearly I goofed. He told me to just run the Madden because the customer didn't specify and their order was coming due shortly. Those pictures also had the pink line, and he looked like he was going to throttle me because he had been on the register now for roughly an hour while I ruined 2 rolls of photo paper that I later found out cost the store $500 each. A customer came up to the register and he rang out the customer. After that, he took a deep breath, calmly looked at me and said, "Go take a break. When the next manager shift comes in, they'll cover the register and we'll go to the office and talk." This was around 12:30, and the next manager got there at 2. The next hour and a half was probably one of the most stressful times of my life. When the next manager came in, I nervously went up to the office. He looked at me and said something along the lines of, "Look, I know this is your second double, and I appreciate you agreeing to work this, but if you're too tired to do the job, just have us call another store to see if they'll cover. Those photo paper things cost a lot of money, so if you don't think you can do it, have your manager do it. They're all trained on it. If you keep messing this up, I'm going to have to replace you. Let me buy you an energy drink for the rest of your shift, though." That energy drink hit the spot, and I didn't ruin another roll of photo paper the whole time I worked there. That manager actually wanted to promote me to a shift lead a few months after that, but CVS policy prevents people under 18 being shift leads. Story 23. Worked phone technical support in the late 90s. We had an instant messenger, IM program, but weren't supposed to use it, only if the managers contacted you. So a manager starts a large group conversation on a Friday, then immediately drops off. We continue chatting and having fun for a few minutes, but most drop out. About 10 of us kept it going. After some time, someone invites a few of our Canadian counterparts to the conversation. We're joking back and forth about who has the better beer, how their weather is sunny, ours was rainy that day, etc. In the spirit of fun, I post the lyrics to the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaxmen song from Ren and Stimpy. Seems to be no big deal. Conversation dies out within about 15 minutes, and we eventually turn it off. I then get a dreaded manager asking my name and group manager. Uh-oh. Within a few minutes, I am called in by my manager, and he takes me to another manager who runs the Canadian group. I was reported as making offensive and harassing comments. My manager asks me very solemnly, "What did you say?" I just know I'm so fired at this point. Me. I quoted the lyrics to the Ren and Stimpy Royal Canadian Kilted Yaxmen song. He snorts and almost does a spit take laughing, then quickly recovers and says, "Okay, don't do it again. Is only to be used for work purposes." The other manager just kind of rolls her eyes, tells me the Canadian team doesn't have a sense of humor, and reiterates not doing it again. And that was it. I got away with a slap on the wrist. Story 24. I once was chatting with a higher-up manager about how a lot of people were away on the holidays. She said she may leave early, but was stuck pulling a couple extra hours with all the people out getting their stuff handled. As she was walking away, what I wanted to say was, yeah, don't want to have anyone working harder at their job than they have to this time of year, or something like that. What came out of my mouth was, yeah, don't want to have to make you do your job. She was already around a corner by the time I got that far, so my brain made me stop talking. Then I realized what I had just said, but it was too late. She was already gone. I heard about it quite a bit from my direct superior later, but nothing came of it. Story 25. I worked at a bar as a barback. Bartender's Karen. The bar had 3 levels, so I would usually hang out before my shift with the 2 other barbacks I would be working with that night. We were at my apartment, drinking a little before an evening shift. It's the norm there to work a little drunk. And one of the other barbacks busts out some substances. I hadn't smoked more than a handful of times in past 5 years due to probation, but that's another story. So the liquid courage in me decided, duck it, I'll smoke a bowl. Little did I know this guy is a ducking professional. I'm so high I can't comprehend the opening mechanism of his Jeep Cherokee's door. Weedman has to open it for me. We arrive at work, 10 minutes late. I clock in and the first thing I have to do is change a keg. For those of you who don't know, a full keg weighs about 160 pounds. This certain keg was also on the second row, which is about 4 feet off the ground. After 15 minutes of struggling, I finally secured the keg in place and slumped to the floor in a pool of sweat, panting like a dog on a hot summer day. I'm cotton-mouthed as duck. I grab the first thing in sight, which happens to be some alcoholic lemonade Karen drink. I'm chugging this down and notice out of the corner of my eye the Bloody Mary garnishes. These are celery wrapped with fresh provolone cheese, boar's head salami, and an olive. I start devouring the entire container, telling myself I'll prep more once I'm finished. As I'm taking another sip of my lemony douche water, the walk-in fridge doors spring open. There, standing in the doorway, is my bar manager, the head chef, and the general manager of the entire restaurant. I'd like to say I played it off cool. I'd like to say I even panicked a little and profusely apologized. I'd be lying. I giggled uncontrollably for about 30 seconds. After my laughter had subsided and their looks of bewilderment had changed into looks anger, I stood up and kind of brushed the imaginary dust off my pants and shirt. Can I get barback that brought the substances keys before I leave so I can get some of my belongings out of his Jeep? I never returned to pick up my last check. Story 26. Not my story, but my dad's. He grew up dirt poor and had worked since he was 12, started with mowing lawns for the neighbors, until he was old enough to pass for 16 and got a real job. And he saved every penny he earned. The savings went toward his first car and then toward college. Since he had no help paying for his college classes, he went to a state university with very affordable tuition, this was in the 70s, and worked part-time while going to school. At the beginning of his sophomore year, he applied for a job at Eddie Bauer, an outdoorsy retail store based out of Seattle. He was hired as the store opener at the flagship store, and the first duty of his shift was to vacuum the entire sales area, which was 2 floors of clothing and gear. His first day on the job, his boss shows him the industrial vacuum and tells him to start in the fishing department and work his way down to the first floor. So, my dad hauls the machine up to the second floor and stares around in wonder at all the expensive fishing poles lined up on the wall. He walks over to one and flips the tag over to see that it cost $60, which was top of the line back then. So he fires up the vacuum, and as he's making his way across the floor, he notices a loud popping sound every couple of seconds. He looks up to see that one by one, the fishing rods are moving toward my dad and snapping. He quickly shuts off the vacuum and runs over to the wall with all the fishing rods. It turns out the fishing line from the rods was pulled all the way out and left all over the carpet the previous evening. And as he ran the vacuum across the floor, it was sucking up the lines, causing the rods to fly off the wall display and snap. So he walks sheepishly up to his new boss and says, "Well, I have a feeling I'm going to have the record for the shortest employment term with this company." When his boss asks what happened, and my dad explains, his boss says, "Son, that fishing line is practically invisible, and there is no way you could have known that it was left out on the floor. This is not your fault at all, and I'll be charging the manager of the fishing department with replacing all of these rods." My dad kept his job, and years later he came back to the store and asked if his old manager was still working there. He was pulled aside and questioned because, as it turns out, the old manager and one of the female employees at the time were embezzling money from the company. They wanted to know how my dad knew them and if he was involved in the theft. They quickly realized he had no idea what had been going on and let him leave. As he was driving home, my dad realized that the reason his manager had not fired him that day was probably because he thought my dad was too stupid to realize what was going on and bust him. I guess he was right about that one. For the record, my dad is a very smart guy and recently retired after starting and running his own CPA firm for many years. His office had almost no turnover because my dad was a great boss who always tried to make coming to work fun for his employees. This is still one of my favorite workplace stories of all time. Story 27. I worked at a ticket booth for a water park in high school as a summer job. It was in 2010, and so a lot of the people I was working with were adults with families and whatnot, but we were all very close because it's retail, and thus gives you all a common enemy. Anyway, with school starting back up again, I had put in my 2 weeks notice. It was a summer job, so I actually had to give my end date on the first day, but we still had to submit a notice. Our company was extremely paranoid about cash. We couldn't have any money or cards on us at any time while working, and you couldn't leave your work area at all once you were given money unless you checked your till back into your supervisor, including every bathroom break. There were cameras all over the booth, and you had to explicitly count any money on the table separated so that it would show up on camera. All money was counted randomly throughout your shift twice a day and then again at the end. If you had a variance of over $20, it was considered a Class 3 violation and you were immediately fired. Tickets for the water park were about $60 a person, so one duck up was essentially all you got in ticketing. Anyway, a woman I was working with, probably about 45, was checking her till in at the same time as me. We talked a lot during downtime. I know she had 3 kids and was recently divorced. She kept full custody of the kids, but she was essentially a housewife before. Her husband was very well off, and though with some support payments she could keep afloat, she had to take the job to be able to give her kids nice things. She was frustrated at her husband always getting to be the hero who would come in to take them on vacation, didn't have to discipline them, and had the money to buy them new game systems and the clothes that her daughter wanted and whatnot. She was stressed and low on sleep all the time, working other jobs too. Anyway, we're tilling out, and then I realize she's taking a long time We put our money through a scanner, and there's only one, so I was waiting for her to finish. And I realize she's running everything through multiple times. So I ask what's going on, and I realize her eyes are getting really watery, and she whispers that she's off by $36. Now, we really can't make a fuss because whilst the cameras don't do audio, there are supervisors around. So I, in a split-second decision, shuffled some paperwork around and slipped the money to her till and told her to just try again. I figured that was signing off on my death certificate. I got fired on the spot when they checked me out after. They took my gate keys and my ID card. A security officer was called, and he escorted me to the break room to get my stuff, and then to my car, where they took my parking pass and drove behind me in their golf cart until I was out of the gates. I wasn't allowed to see anyone or say goodbye, so there was no real closure with me and that woman. She did call me a couple days later to say thank you and how much it meant and whatnot, and invited me over for dinner with her family, but I was getting ready to go back to school in a couple days and said no thanks. Story 28. Mine was more of a, well, I'm going to eventually get fired sort of situation that began over a year ago, but came to a head just yesterday. I took a sales role out of state and moved there in June of 2012. For the next 3 months, I went through orientation and training and certification. By September, I was ready to go. In November, our manager calls a regional meeting and says she's going back into a sales capacity. I get held aback after everyone else leaves, and the new manager informs me that the now former manager is going to inherit my territory and I'll be in a support role. Mind you, I'm commuting 250 miles each way every weekend to see my wife and son, who still hadn't, and ultimately never did, relocated with me yet. So before I even get a real chance to do my job, it's taken from me. While she eventually told a few lies as to why she stepped down, the truth was she sucked horribly as a manager, but was under a guaranteed contact. Also, I'm in no way qualified in this support capacity, so I'm not happy. Anyways, fast forward a few months, I'm working an account, like I always did, because she lived 3 hours away from just the western half of what was once my old territory. Line up a big deal and bring her in for contracting. Well, she fails to speak to me about who to speak to and who not to. Again, considering the distance, she rarely ever visited this area. And the deal nearly implodes because she went over the heads of some folks she shouldn't have. Those folks then bring me in and tell me angrily that she's cut out and that they don't want her in the account ever again. This isn't the first time her crafty communication skills has caused me headaches. Not even the first time at that particular account either, but it was the most major. So I email and then call her about what transpired and how, very kindly and professionally mind you, she needs to communicate with me better so that I can be sure and provide her and our clients and our company with my best possible work, etc. She gets offended and laces into me, screaming about the mistakes I've made, again, bound to happen when I wasn't hired on to perform the job I was forced into. I keep a level head, smooth things over with the account, and just move on. Next month, I find out they're hiring another support member for the territory I supposedly cover. Month after that, he gets hired. Month after that, I get all but the account that hates her, that she knew about. There were more than a dozen across the whole state that wanted nothing to do with her. And finally, yesterday, my manager lets me go. Although I'm sure to bring up, without specifics and in a professional manner, how much she is disliked by our customers, other employees in our division, others in our company, and even other industry sales reps, and how business will never turn around like it could and should with her leading things. The icing? I got a 3-month severance package yesterday and got a job offer today that'll finally bring me back to my family after a year and a half of only seeing them on the weekend. Story 29. I worked tech support for my university's School of Engineering. It was late, and I was in the labs doing homework with people. After I finished, I was just wandering the halls because I was bored. One of my coworkers left his ID in a classroom. We use our IDs to unlock each classroom, so I had to let him in. Usually, we only have to slide our wallet over this black box, and if our ID is in there, it will unlock. I decided that since my wallet is in my back pocket, all I'd have to do is put my butt up against the wall, and the door would open. It was a little high, so I had to jump. I took a step, jumped up, spun around to scan my butt, and immediately put both feet through the drywall. I stuck the landing, made eye contact with the other employee, and walked away. I came back, slid a wet floor sign in front of the holes I made, and put in a work order to have them filled. They were filled, and nobody besides me, and that coworker ever knew I did it. I still work there. Story 30. I have the perfect story for this thread. This happened in the late 90s to a coworker of mine when we both worked at a big movie-themed restaurant that may or not have been partially owned by 3 cast members from The Expendables. Our store was located in a big southern town, and we would get all kinds of white trash that came into the city for vacations or concerts or monster truck pulls or whatever, and damn if they didn't all come and eat with us. One afternoon, my friend had a table of 2 rednecks and their 3 kids, The dad did all the talking. He ordered the drinks, the food, everything for the entire family. Even when the kids would tell him they didn't want something, he would tell them to shut up and order it anyway. He wants a Coke. No, Dad, I want a Sprite. He wants a Coke. The whole family just had this broken look that comes from giving up after years of endless fighting. So they order a nachos appetizer that was X number of individual chips with toppings under melted cheese. None of the appetizers were huge because the dinners were all big. Also, they weren't that expensive, even for a tourist trap theme restaurant. You got what you paid for. That part is important because it's the impetus for the drama. My friend comes back to the table to clear the appetizer plate, and it is spotless. Not a piece of lettuce, a scrap of cheese, a smear of sour cream, nothing. A pristine black plate. My friend looks at the dad and says, "Well, I guess you all enjoyed the nachos." The dad looks up and with his thick country accent says, "Actually, they were a little skimpy. We were expecting something more." My friend smiles and politely explains that the appetizers aren't huge, so you don't fill up, etc., etc. See my description above. The guy glares at him, points his finger at him angrily, and loudly declares, "Listen here, some Karen. Where I come from in Alabama, when we order a plate of nachos, we expect a plate of nachos." For whatever reason, plate of nachos made my friend snap. He looked at the guy right in the face, smiled, and asked, "Don't you still hang black people in Alabama?" The guy just froze and looked at him, confused, and then realized he had no way to respond. My friend's exact words to me about it were, "I saw the words form 3D shapes and come out of my mouth. There was nothing I could do to stop them." The first thought that went through my head was, I hope Hard Rock is hiring. The best part? The guy didn't say anything else. He just slumped down in his seat and ate his dinner when it was served. The rest of the family perked up and were almost giddy because Dad got put in his place and he couldn't fight back. My friend, knowing he wasn't getting a tip anyway, even brought the kid a Sprite because he knew it would piss the guy even more. Nothing was ever said by management, so we can only assume the guy never called corporate and complained or anything. Little side note, my friend quit soon after and never worked a real job again as he became a full-time, semi-famous musician who may or may not have been nominated for a Grammy and played on a big late-night talk show in the last few weeks. Story 31. This is good. You'll love it. My supervisor has had it in for me for a while now. Tries every little thing he can to get me written up with HR and put me on a PIP, performance improvement plan, one step away from being fired. Ultimate goal for him is to replace me with an H-1B at a lower salary. Luckily, at my age, I'm seasoned, and I know how to deal with these sorts of things. One of our coworkers had brought a juice maker into work. Someone used it and just let fruit pulp dry on it. She was mad, left a note for the culprit to clean it. Same day, someone steals a slice of my pizza from the fridge. So it's the end of the day. I wash her juicer and write a funny, snarky note. Next day is all high fives from everyone in the company. Everyone saw the note and thought it was hilarious. So I take a picture of it and put it up on my Facebook. Friends all like it too. I get an email CC'd to me and HR. "Toker, you have violated the company's social media policy and will be written up by HR." A screenshot of my Facebook post was attached. Thing is, profile is completely private. He must be one of those fake friends on my profile. I asked him, what did I specifically violate? Pro tip, always ask for specifics. Don't let them vaguely accuse you of violating a policy. You gave the impression that our company is full of pizza thieves. A few months earlier, I had browsed his Facebook. Of interest was a post he made, "I hate the nepotism at work." I made my screenshot, sent it to HR, and sat down with the director. My Facebook settings are private, so there's no way he could have gotten that screenshot without being a fake friend. Is he doing this to all the people in our department? Because if he isn't, I'm being singled out. If my profile is private and he's creating fake users, isn't he violating my privacy? Also, we have to apply weight to the comments. He's a director, I'm a peon. Whose position carries more weight? Continuing with weight. Whose comment is more damaging to the company reputation? My complaining about a missing pizza slice? Or his complaining about rampant nepotism? Finally, what is a judge going to say if you fire me over a pizza note? He was absolutely livid, but I was right. There was nothing HR could do about it unless they wanted to write him up too. Good guys win sometimes. Story 32. Not me, but a coworker. I worked at a grocery store, and one of my coworkers was gathering shopping carts outside. He was just minding his own business when, out of nowhere, some cops pulled up. They got out, put him in handcuffs, then proceeded to throw him in the car. Last I saw of him. I can imagine him seeing them and thinking, damn it. Story 33. Worked third shift at a cafe in downtown Milwaukee, and at around 3:30, the cops come in and I comp them their drinks and food, per usual, since my only other clientele typically consisted of the homeless, crackheads, or a combo of both. I asked the cops to watch the place so I can take the trash out back and smoke a cigarette. This, again, was our usual routine. So I grabbed the trash, head out back, and light up my usual 3 a.m. joint. As I'm standing there in the alley, this guy comes around the corner from the Riverwalk, and I hold my breath and hide the J behind me, hoping he'll just keep walking. No, he stops right in front of me, looks at me, and holy crap, it's the owner of the cafe, plus about 4 or 5 other major restaurants in town. If any of you have ever worked in food service in Milwaukee, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. Anyway, he's right in front of me and he asks, "Don't you work for me here at Business Name?" "Yes," I say as I exhale a hit right in his face. "Who's inside then?" "The cops. And they've been comped and are watching the place?" "Yes, sir." "Great, let me hit that." I hand it over to him and he hits it and compliments me on my taste in weed. We stand there smoking the J, talking about restaurants and whatnot. At the end, before I go back inside, he offers me a job as a waiter at his steakhouse, starting as soon as he's able to replace me at the cafe. Long story short, I went from making $7.25 hours serving crackheads who wanted a warm place to stay the night to making around $250 a night in tips. It was pretty ducking sweet. Story 34. Nope. But getting crap loads of trouble? Yes, I have a story about that. So this was back in '05 when I was in the Army. I had just gotten to Bragg and was assigned to an ammo platoon. This meant that I had to get and deliver ammo for the howitzers. Not a terrible job overall. Not a great one, but hey, Army. So part of this is driving the huge FMTVs, which are 6-wheeled monstrosities. I do not have a driver's license at this point, literally having never needed one. A sergeant in my platoon was the battalion master driver and gave me a military license anyways. So one day, a different ENSO decided to make me learn to drive that day. This meant driving a FMTV to the ammunition supply point, ASP, to drop off some brass. No big deal, right? Wrong. See, I did not drive. Everyone knew this. So I'm driving this behemoth along Canopy Lane, and it's time to turn off to Chicken Road. Actual road name. Chicken Road has a gate there, and it's open. But there are plastic barriers that get put in front the gate when it's closed. I start to make my right turn, but I started a bit late. I overcorrect. I go slightly off the road, and I hit a barrier. We pull over. Now, before I continue, I must tell you something about military vehicles. They're crap. Really dog crap. The side view mirrors on this particular truck would push back to the vehicle whenever it was being driven, so I never could see behind me. We get out. There is a ChemWV behind us. It is the battalion commander's. He is in it. I do not drive the rest of the way to the ASP. The rest of the platoon is there, and they laugh at me. A lot. We finish and go back to the barracks for lunch. I stay in my room as I was told to, waiting for my inevitable Article 15 coming. Reduced to an E1 from E3, 45 days of extra duty and forfeiture of half pay for 3 months was staring at me. The sergeant with me when I was driving comes to the door. He says that the sergeant major wants to see me. This was it. I was dead. My military career dead before it began. We get there. SGM wants to know how it happened. I tell him. He asks, "X-axis, did you drive it home?" "No, Sergeant Major." "Well, how'd you get pussy then?" He then spends 5 minutes talking about getting pussy. It was then that I realized that I was not going to be flayed alive by UCMJ action. In the end, all I had to do was do some driver training, which meant scaring a bunch of other junior enlisted on terrible trails out near the DZs while driving with NVGs. But I thought I was going to be in as much trouble as I could get into. Story 35. The female chef at my job was, for some reason, allowed to have her 11-year-old son running around in the restaurant. He was the most obnoxious 11-year-old you can imagine, and I know they can be obnoxious, he thought. Because I was a waiter and his mother was a chef, he was my supervisor. One day I had been taking a cup of coffee in the back and I heard customers coming in. I walked through the kitchen to the reception and halfway there, the kid runs into me and says, "Why weren't you working?" And I just ducking lost it and yelled, "Shut the duck up and let me work," and walk out to the reception. I plastered on a smile and hoped the customers didn't hear me. They'd heard me and I did my best to explain to them that there was a kid around and I did not apply for a job as a babysitter and gave them as good of a service as I could. I thought this was the point at which my temper would finally catch up to me. But it turns out that the chef did not hear and my boss was out on town to do business stuff or something. I can't believe I managed to keep that job. Story 36. I'm a truck driver. I was working up in Northwest Territories in the winter of 2011-2012. It was nighttime on icy roads, and as I'm rounding a curve, some ducking dog-looking creature runs out in front of me. Could have been someone's dog, as this happened right outside Fort Liard, and Naditi, but it was dark. Could have been a wolf, fox, wolverine, coyote, who knows? Anyway, I did exactly what you're not supposed to do in this situation. I slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting it. I didn't hit it, but my trailer ducking jackknifes across the oncoming lane and catches the ditch. I'm gunning it, hoping I can pull it out, but my wheels are just spinning. As soon as I hit the road sign, I gave up and just held on. The ducking trailer flipped. right upside down. It twisted the frame on the truck and the truck landed on its side. Everything in the truck shuts down. It has power locks and windows. I can't get anything open, so there's a moment of panic because I've seen too many action movies and I expected the ducking thing to explode. But I calmed myself down and thought about it. Self, chill out, I say. At this point, the window doesn't matter. So I put my boot through the front driver's side window and crawled out that way. Luckily, being so close to FT Liard, I had cell service. So I sat down on the side of the road, staring at the truck, and it's 25 gearings, and I call my boss. I say to him, Oakland, I have bad news, and I don't know if I'm quitting or I'm fired, but I'm going home tomorrow. What happened? He says. I flipped the ducking truck. Then I told him where and called the cops, then waited for him to come get me. I decided that since it was going to be a while and the truck didn't explode, I'd better get my stuff out of there. So I climbed back in, and it was super disorienting trying to find my stuff, remembering where it is, but turned 90 degrees and figuring out what would have fallen where. But I got it all. Then some other truckers pull over to help me. But I don't really need any help, but they let me sit in one of their warm trucks while I waited. The cop showed up before Oakland, so the other truckers went on their way, and I sat in the cop car doing reports and whatnot. Then later, Oakland showed up and gave his info, drove me back to our camp, and I flew home the next day. Still not sure if I was fired or quit. Doesn't matter. I'm still driving, but for a different company and haven't had an incident since. I wouldn't care if I never went back there. Story 37. A client came in and I confirmed on an old statement the client's personal bank account number. The client waved it away saying it was correct. I thought it was an old statement, so how could we possibly have written the wrong bank account number on the statement? Turns out someone had used the statement as a template and changed the account number and saved over the original document. So when I printed it, I was printing an altered document. Client confirmed that as her account number. I transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars into a random account and swore up and down that I had transferred it into the client's account. Wow, I must have turned a whiter shade of pale. Story 38. One of my first jobs during university, I was working as a technician at a company that did thin film coatings and etching for the telecommunications industry. High precision nanometer to micrometer thick surface patterns. We had some clients come in to test out our facilities before signing up for a batch order. They were working with the engineering staff to test out various protocols on a prototype silicon wafer for about 2 weeks straight. Every day, testing out the full capabilities of all the equipment. Once they were done, they gave this single prototype wafer to me to do profilometry and imaging of the surface features and give them back what was essentially a topography map of the surface at tens of nanometers resolution. Well, there was no way to keep the wafer stable enough on the surface of the profiling system to get the resolution they wanted, so I decided to use what I thought was the very weak double-sided tape I had been using to date on my calibration wafers. I mistakenly grabbed the graphite tape, which was the same color, quickly threw it down as everyone was waiting for me to get going, and put the wafer on it. Well, I had misjudged the position, and so I put my scalpel just underneath the edge and applied pressure to lift it up off the tape and reposition and snap. The entire wafer split into about 100 pieces. A half dozen people had worked on this thing for 2 weeks. No one was in the room at the time. I just sat there thinking, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Well, I'm getting fired and never hired again. I kind of just cowered in the room until my boss came in, and there were a few quiet moments where he looked at the sample and back to me and back to the sample again. Then, surprisingly, he calmly pointed up the biggest piece and said that they had repeated the pattern over the entire wafer, and there were enough test sites on the big piece for me to have confidence in the measurement results and not to bring it up with the client. Then he left, and I did the measurement on a big broken piece stuck with tape to the bottom of my profilometer. The client was pleased with the results and never knew. Story 39. I've never had a better response to one of these questions, so let's hope this doesn't get buried. I worked at an elementary school as a lunchroom and recess supervisor for kindergarten and first graders. Often on the playground, kids would ask me and a couple coworkers to kick soccer, football, and playground balls far for them to chase. It isn't hard to impress children, but I played soccer at the university nearby, so they generally favored my skills. One day, a first grader came running to me with a playground ball and said, "Mr. Just Godver, kick the ball as far as you can," and rolled it to me. Even though I had done it 100 times before, this time I got into goal mode and put my head down, set up my approach, locked my ankle, and blasted it low. Can't shoot that ball over the crossbar, coach will get angry. And as soon as I lifted my head up, I started running towards the kid because I knew it was going to be awful. I got to him a few seconds after he landed, and he was crying pretty hard, but his face looked just fine. As soon as I looked up, I knew it was fired, but this kid took it like a champ. He cried for a while, but when I asked about going to the nurse's office, he said he was fine. I got really lucky. He ended up being fine. A few minutes later, no other kids were really looking, so they didn't spread what happened. he looked completely fine. And when I asked him how his head felt, he said it was good and ran away giggling with another friend. He was also Hispanic, so he didn't have a huge visible red ball mark on his face that us white kids would have had. I worked there another year after until I graduated college. Story 40, I worked for Vail Ski Resort as a chef at Two Elk Lodge a few years back. Because my boss was an ass, we were the only department on the mountain that never once got ride breaks. A ride break is where, when it's slow, your boss lets you clock out for an hour to grab a lap or two. Let's be honest, why the duck else would I be working for minimum wage at a ski resort if I didn't want to ski at least a bit? Anyway, my boss didn't believe in ride breaks, so I got scheduled to work Christmas Day, and it is absolutely dead. Everyone's doing family stuff, and the few people on the mountain were enjoying the foot of fresh pow, not eating. So I've been twiddling my thumbs for an hour, and when my boss comes by and tells me to re-clean my station, which I had just scrubbed spotless, instead of standing around, I asked him if I could just clock out for an hour and ride. He looks at me like I'm speaking Arabic or something and reiterates his no ride break policy. I just look at him and go, "Look, it's Christmas. We literally haven't had a single customer all day. You're handing out busy work because there's nothing left to do, and there's a foot of fresh powder on the ground. Let me rephrase my request. I'm clocking out and I'm going skiing. If you want to fire me on Christmas Day, please do it now so I don't have to bother coming back." Yeah, he fired me then. On Christmas. What an ass. Worked out for me though. Ended up getting a why better job. Same ducking day from a guy I shared a bowl with on the chairlift. He heard the story, laughed, and asked if I knew how to tune skis. I told him I have been doing my own tune job since I was 10, and he gave me a job as his shop on the spot. Said he liked a guy with the balls to tell his boss to shove it. Story 41. I worked as a media buyer, and on my third day on the job, my boss asked me to find some information and update the huge spreadsheet he was working for the client's annual plan. As I was about to update it, he opened the file to finish a few things and asked me to wait. Now I'm the new girl, wanting to show service. I decide to open a copy of the spreadsheet and update it there. So when he finishes, I know where it goes. He finishes, lets me know I can open the file, I just get mine, update it, and save on top of his work. I basically made him lose his entire day of work. The year-round spreadsheet was ready, and the one I had was a rough draw. I really thought he was going to throw his monitor on my head. He changed colors and had to leave the office in order to curse me. I apologized the next day, so did he, and we agreed to always save versions from that day on. Story 42. A few years ago, I was reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy while on my lunch break. Highly recommend BTW. At one point, I came across a word I was unfamiliar with. The context in which it was used gave me no clue as to what it could have meant. This was before I had a smartphone, so I wrote the word down and decided to look it up online when I got back to the office. The word was catamite. Wait until you're at home to look it up if you don't know what it is. Explaining why I Googled it was rather awkward, but I did not lose my job, fortunately. Story 43. Mine is extraordinarily NSFW, working at an adult store. I was at this time very naive and mostly inexperienced. So I'm a young, inexperienced gay guy working in a very cruisy store on the evening shift. This guy comes in, he's precisely my type, and he's flirting very strongly with me. I, being completely inexperienced in this department, am basically putty in this guy's hand. I ended up giving him a BJ right there behind the counter, and he end on the side of the counter. He zips up, goes his merry way, and I clean up the mess. I was a morass of oh crap feelings. First of all, I had just cheated on my boyfriend, who was and really truly deserved it. But I was Catholic at the time, so I wallowed in the guilt anyway. Secondly, it occurred to me after the fact that there's a camera pointing right at the area behind the counter, filming my every move. The VHS tapes it records on, this was 1996, were locked in the media cabinet, so I couldn't cover up my misdeed. I casually asked the manager if the people in the office even watched those tapes. I played it off like it was, why do they even bother, haha. He said, oh yeah, they watch them. The owner's son watches them. I was horrified. Bad enough that I was going to be found out, but add to the fact that I had a huge crush on the owner's son, and I thought I'd die from embarrassment and shame. A couple weeks go by and nobody says anything. I was sure I was going to be fired. Then the owner's son comes in to collect the deposits for the bank run, and he was smirking at me and gave me this knowing wink and smile. He also said some things that made me quite certain he'd watched my performance. So I didn't get fired. I ended up working there for another 5 years and managed the store for about 3 of them. Story 44. Worked at Blockbuster. Someone apparently had paid with a $10 bill, and I gave them 80-some odd dollars in change. My till was almost $90 short that night. Found the transaction, found the account it was tied to, tried calling to plea for mercy. Number is disconnected. Manager's a good friend of mine. She says, well, I'll leave a note for store manager. He'll want to talk to you tomorrow. I come in the next morning and store manager is there. Really quiet, really focused, very polite, but I can tell something is on his mind. An hour goes by and we work in relative silence. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and then I go to lunch. I come back ready to face the music. So, am I fired or what? Store manager gives me a weird look. What? Why would you be fired? I take a deep breath and say, because of how short I came up last night. We tried to get in touch with the customer. We even took the register apart in case we made a mistake. Wait, he says, what happened? Turns out either the note didn't get left or he didn't find it. He calls the manager from the previous night. She tells him about it. He comes out of the back office like 15 minutes later and says, look, any other day, I would have written you up. You wouldn't have been fired. Everyone makes mistakes. But since you owned up to it, I'm going to just say a mistake got made and leave it at that. And a sigh of relief from me. Story 45. This happened this summer, actually. I was a camp counselor at this school in town. The camp had kids grades 1-4. This camp was mostly a recreation camp where most of the time it was playing games with the kids and go to the pool and other cool things. I was assigned with 2 other counselors who were also pretty cool, and we were assigned to first graders. Anyways, let's go to the main part. There was this girl in my group who mainly hang with me because she liked me the most, I guess. Many days I would give her underdogs, where you push the person on the swing 2 times well, while still holding on to the sides, and then the third swing, you do a big one, and then let go, and it makes them go high up. So that was a daily thing we did. One day she was being super cocky, and she told me that she wanted a really, really good underdog, and for me to push her as hard as possible. Me being the stupid person that I am, accepted the challenge. So I swung twice, then came the third swing. I pushed the sides with all my might and let her rip. Well, the little girl decides at the peak of the push, better let go. She comes crashing to the ground from about 5 or 6 feet high on her back. At that moment, I went, oh, duck me, I'm done for. Turns out she was okay. Her back was a little scrapped and she was crying, and luckily I wasn't fired. But damn, when she fell, my heart just stopped. Story 46. Line cook at a restaurant, one of my managers was a lady and we would rib on each other. She got a blank expression on her face. I looked at the guy next to me and he had the, well, it's been nice having you around look on his face. I look back at her and just grin because that's all I can do at this point. She slowly reaches out her hand and gives me a fist bump and commends me on my comeback. Didn't get fired. It did close down later though. Oh well. Story 47. I worked at a call center and was joking around with a friend of mine. She had just engaged in a relationship with another girl and was complaining that the sex wasn't very good, making jokes, and saying that she wanted to play with her new girlfriend's ass, but her girlfriend was having none of it. Off mute, without missing a beat, I just looked my friend and said, so, you like butt play, do you? And then, totally quietly, I hear the customer's voice. You're off mute, just so you know. I went pale. As soon as the call was done, I approached my supervisor, who was and still is cool as hell. I've left there, but we still play games together all the time, and gave him a heads up in case a manager approaches him about it. Thankfully, it looks like the call went by unnoticed. In a time where we were having 25 calls a week listened to, and I only took about 10 a day, and I wasn't fired.